Welcome to the Phosphine Catalogue, number 15037. We see light where others see only darkness. Thank you very much to those who attended our Saturnalia performance of Swyno'r Ddraig last week. Your generosity in supporting the arts made the event go off with a bang. Lord Dean Aldwick, a patron who's developed a very close relationship with the Catalogue recently, has informed us that the final amount raised by the production was a little over £100,000. In a very generous gesture, Lord Aldwick will be matching the amount before donating the money to the Howell House Grant for Young Artists. To those readers who were unable to attend the performance, you will find in this week's catalogue a 4-page supplement of my review and summary of the play, both as curator and performer. It was a transformative experience. I don't know how much of this I can put in the catalogue, but maybe I can edit out some of the more extraordinary details. Swyno'r Ddraig, traditional, 1976. A theatre production adapted and directed by Lord Dean Aldwick. On the night of Saturnalia, the patrons filed into the bellroom in their evening finery, and as Aldwick greeted them as director, I noticed, with some amusement, the look of surprise when they saw the stage. Nothing more than a raised platform of wooden boards with red velvet hiding the mesh of scaffolding. Large, certainly, but far from the grandeur or elegance of the National Theatre just across the river to the southwest. Seeing this, I shared a knowing glance with Harriet Meara. She'd helped fundraise for the play, and so also knew just how many thousands of pounds many of the audience had donated to what now seemed, to them, quite the budget production. Harry winked and stepped behind a screen that we'd set up in a corner as the backstage area. She was already wearing half the costume she'd put together for her part of the blacksmith's son, though as she disappeared to change, I wondered why she'd bothered. As I was ushering everyone to their seats, Pierre Bayer pulled me aside and asked if I had his spectacle case, the one he'd left after the auction in the Colquhoun Gallery. I had just enough time to dash upstairs to my office and grab the dark green leather case with the inscription Videmus ubi rime in vitro erunt, and return it to him. I was burning with curiosity to know what "we see where the cracks in the glass will be" means, but when I asked Mr. Bayer, he said that he really had to find his seat and promised to explain another time. Typical. I'm beginning to wonder if the patrons are hiding as many secrets as the catalogue itself. At midnight, right on cue, intern Andrew Waring turned off the main gallery lights high overhead. The room darkened. The 30 or so people in the audience found their seats, and silence broke over the room. The only light a dim outline from the gallery's large doorway, which was left slightly ajar. Dark fog flooded the space, blocking out the remainder of the dim light sources in the room, the mist acting as a stage curtain to our play. This was from no smoke machine, nor due to any stagecraft. The magic of the play had been set in motion. As the darkness deepened, I involuntarily closed my eyes. Though I knew what to expect, it still didn't quite prepare me. I balled my hands into fists, nails pinching my palms as I felt the change begin. "See you on the other side," David Isaac muttered to no one in particular, and though he was standing right in front of me, his voice sounded muffled. "I bloody hate this part," answered Warwick, who was already beginning to sound a little hoarse. I opened my eyes as I heard a door slam, and suddenly felt bright, hot sunlight on my face. The stage ahead of us was gone, replaced by a lush green forest clearing with rows of astonished patrons now sitting all around us on living hedge benches. It was as Edward Porter and I had anticipated. opening night was not to be in the bellroom after all. Nor in London, or England, or anywhere one might visit in the waking world. We had been transported directly into the fey world that I know as the Garden, but perhaps it is much, much more. I looked down at what I was then wearing, a leather waistcoat brocaded with ivy, with shoes of stitched oak leaves, and I gently touched the shivering silver moth hung as a pendant around my neck. Next to me, Sarah, now the princess, clothed in a thin frock of leaves, squeezed my hand, and on our cue, pulled me into the light. Edward's plan was simple. He would wait quietly in the pentai room, which I'd left unlocked, while the play began, and he would listen for our cue, my soliloquy in Act 1, the same speech he had first applauded me for back in Rossetti House. When I finished that, he would spring his trap. We didn't know exactly what Aldwick's ritual was, but we thought we could disrupt it simply enough. The first act began as planned, opening by introducing the central farce among four lovers: the princess, Sarah, the blacksmith's son, Harriet, the prince, Aldwick, and Commutatio, played by yours truly. Before we proceeded to Act 2, where the story splits to encompass a meta-narrative where a group of amateur actors are rehearsing their own play, it was time for my first big speech. I stood alone in the lush woodland clearing that was our stage, surrounded by motes of dust hanging in the golden sunlight, encircled by the enraptured patrons of the Catalogue. I realised, as I spoke Commutatio's words, written by Aldwick, out into this world, that the audience were also part of his ritual. It was not just my colleagues and I who were dancing to his tune, a surrogate for Morwenna's court, but these patrons in the audience, too, would bear witness to him stealing away the whole catalogue. Quite the hoard. As the end of the first act came closer, my mind began to wander back to the mundane world, and to the bellroom. Edward was now surely at the door. Perhaps already Pondwater was creeping towards the seated audience. Our plan was to interrupt the play permanently by flooding the gallery using Edward's strange affinity with deep water, the same vengeful torrent he'd directed at the Catalogue after Joe and I broke into his studio and found the coffin labelled Ornan. But something was going wrong. As I squinted my eyes against the warm sunlight in the Fey world, I became more aware of the hard wooden boards beneath my bare feet, the stuffy air of the gallery, and eventually the sound of heavy crashing coming from where I remembered the door should be. My heart fell through sheet ice as I realised that the sound I had heard as the dark fog flooded the stage was the gallery door being closed. Edward's flood could not penetrate the galleries before. The wards protected them. I stumbled over the last stanzas of my soliloquy, turning away from the bright spotlight of the sun, and ran into the cool shade of the bushes that were the wings of the stage. Aldwick was waiting for me, now wearing the prince's red suit made of interlocking scales, and a webbed necklace of dark rubies that seemed oddly familiar. I could not stop to wonder why he was wearing Pendragon's Tears, the jealous artefact that had destroyed all the gems in Garrard & Co. He bowed his head as I approached, miming slow applause, but his face was hard and unsmiling as he placed a heavy hand on my shoulder, leaned in, and muttered, "A shame Herr Portier couldn't join us. He's rather out of his depth, I'm afraid. And besides, we're fully booked. It's a rather exclusive audience." And his eyes flashed with golden flame in the dappled light. I had no time to process what our failure could mean before Act 2 began, and a gang composed of Annalene Mayer, Carissa Verville, David Isaac, and Mina Olivia Copeland swept past me out into the clearing. They were 4 of the 5 people in the B plot, involving a group of players rehearsing a play. There should have been 5, the lead part of Helena having been played by Josephine Croft until her disappearance in a flash as we fled from Edward a month ago. We had rehearsed without her, Helena's lines being spoken by others in the troupe as it made sense to do so. But as it turned out, we needn't have bothered. As the 4 circled the stage area, the otherworldly sunlight grew stronger and stronger, forming a spotlight in the centre of the clearing. David was closest. I saw him turn to us backstage with wide eyes. This was not what we had rehearsed. The sunlight reached such an intensity that it was like a pillar of white gold, pushing the 4 players physically away from it. But then a shape resolved in the pillar. A woman stepped out from behind the sunbeam and into the clearing. It was Jo. She was wearing a moth silk floor-length white gown, buckled at the waist and shoulders with leather belts, and high-heeled shoes that were made of glass or clouds or nothing, making her seem to float just above the forest floor. Like Sarah's dappled dream dress, it was as beautiful as it was transparent, leaving no doubt that a woman, a radiant, beautiful woman, had just stepped out from the sunbeam. The applause from the audience of patrons surprised me, but of course they thought it was all part of the act. And as Jo, Helena, performed her lines without missing a beat, I wondered if it just might be. Jo's presence, both physically and the vigour that she brought to her performance, inspired us, making me almost forget that we were all dancing to Aldwick's tune. Almost. In the opening of the second half of the play, the forest shifted around us, extending the stage out from the circular clearing up a grassy incline to a raised hill. There, just as in Seemly Unseelie, Aldwick's prison painting, lay Morwenna, the Queen of Moths, sleeping in the same thin green dress of leaves and moth and circlet, surrounded by the same fairy ring. Yet, as I looked on from the shaded hedge wings of the stage, differences from the painting presented themselves. The circle that in the painting had been formed mostly by white puffy mushrooms was now dominated by misshapen red and blue-capped fungi, dripping with black ichor. The Queen was no longer smiling blissfully in slumber, her lips curled into a grimace or sneer. And, most shockingly, were the crimson drops of blood on the neckline of the green dress, below a small but wicked-looking wound. I felt sick. My hands were shaking. But whatever magic Aldwick had woven into the play was now pulling us all along like a torrent, and I was powerless to stop. If the others felt the same, they did not show it. I focused my anger into my third act speech against the guild, the church, and the gods themselves, which I now imagined to be Aldwick, Aldwick, and Aldwick. The curtain of night began to fall as we entered the final act. Our sunlight spotlight was now replaced by silver moonlight, and the stars above mirrored the wide, glinting eyes of our audience. The play seemed to accelerate to its climax. The prince, Aldwick, having bested all suitors, marries the princess, and Helena's troupe perform their play at the wedding. The play within the play is also called Swyno'r Ddraig. You know how clever playwrights all think themselves. The only detail left in the original story was for the Queen to miraculously wake up and bless the new couple, and for the audience to go home believing that sometimes, just sometimes, everything will be all right. But that's not how this production was to end. The prince, in Aldwick's dark red suit of scales, stood at the centre of a long table, around which the entire cast were sat. Raising a bone goblet that shone white in the moonlight, he began the toast that should have concluded the production. He began by thanking all those present, which of course was a subtle nod to the audience, and also to the wise gods for smiling on his very special day. As he spoke, he walked lazily in the direction of the sleeping queen, to Morwenna. I realised after a moment or two that he was committing the very same sin that he forbade us from doing. He was going off script. What started as a speech of gratitude and thanksgiving veered wildly into talk of how his kind should be worshipped, and the ancient rites that had been long denied him, anger cutting into his voice as he talked of control, power, gold, and the acquisition of the three. Aldwick reached the climax of this unhinged tirade as he came to the end of the long wedding table closest to the hill Morwenna was lying on, ending with, "And who dares stop me?" He then reached his arm under the white cloth covering the end of the table, and in a single motion closed the distance between him and the sleeping moth and queen, having drawn a familiar sword from its hiding spot under the table. Carissa screamed as we saw the sword come down, and the moon winked out of the sky, plunging us all into darkness.
Hi folks, Tris here, writer of the Phosphine Catalogue. I hope you've loved listening to Season 3 as much as Wolfie and I enjoyed making it. Stay tuned after the episode for updates. Now, Side B.
And that was that. You know the rest of the story, Morwenna. The strip lights of the gallery came on, or perhaps were now visible, as we all returned to ourselves, silvery laughter ringing in our ears. You were now standing, sword in paint-covered hand, with an arm around a baffled-looking Aldwick. How did he get that sword? The one that I found in your basement room with that watercolour steering the craft. You gave us quite the shock, lass. But I think no one was more surprised than the old dragon. Our audience of patrons gave us a standing ovation. Not a single one remained sitting in their metal folding chairs. And as though in a different kind of dream, all the players joined hands and bowed, before hiding behind the backstage screen. "What just happened?" Sarah whispered to me. "Did you see his face?" David laughed. "I'm just happy that it's over," Warwick said, touching his face, as though to prove to himself that he was again human. No one got a chance to talk to our director. He stormed out, barging past the smiling, well-dressed audience, who then mobbed you. Did you tear your eyes away from signing autographs or whatever you were doing to see Aldwick rush out of the bellroom, Morwenna? Our trap worked after all. The man slipped on the mud and muck outside the door and fell right on his back, ruining his shimmering suit. What a shame. We cleaned up the entrance and helped patrons into their cabs that Harry had booked for 2 a.m. I'd pushed everyone else out by 3, after making Jo promise to tell me everything that had happened to her in the garden tomorrow, over breakfast at home. As David and Jo bundled into a cab, Jo tripping on her now too long dress, one thing was clear. She was as radiant now in our mundane world as she had always been in the garden. "Where to, miss?" I heard the cabbie say as the door closed. "Morwenna, I'm sorry. I realised in all the excitement I'd locked you out of your office. I've not seen you since your reappearance at the end of the play last week. I half expected you to just be here after I opened the new lock that replaced the one Liz Morgan's boot smashed. But no, everything in here is as I left it. Almost as I left it. The painting you were trapped in is... well, you know what? As we might sell this, let's do it properly. Lot number 9011. Selenium Élysée. Lord Dean Aldwick, modified by an unknown artist. 1976, oil on stone, 3 foot by 5 foot, a mixed media painting with flowing oil. If I didn't know better, I would assume this painting had been vandalised. The metal name plaque has been scratched with thin gouges that in some cases penetrate through to the stone frame underneath. These scratches spell out the title, Selenium Élysée, an anagram of the original title Seemly Unseelie, and oil paint splashed wildly over the bottom third. The top 2/3 of the painting show the same composition as before, a woodland clearing of verdant grass and thick moss. In the centre lies a now rather crumpled white cotton sheet, and while the remnants of the mushroom circle are visible, it has been broken and mostly removed. The moon appears through a slightly different set of branches at the edge of the clearing, now full and bright, dominating the field of strange stars. Where previously the painting was full of semi-human nude revellers, now there remains just a single subject sitting cross-legged on the edge of the white cotton sheet, as though at a solitary picnic. Her black hair falls over her face as she leans over a piece of rough paper, arm blurred and almost spectral as she draws with a piece of charcoal gripped in her fist. The face of this young artist is not visible, but I believe I can guess who it is. Seeing my old friend Edie in her moonlit Elysium otherworld, finally at peace, makes me feel... On second thoughts, Morwenna, we're not selling this. I'm keeping it. I can't believe you put us through all this stress and worry, Morwenna. I've never seen you in the centre of attention like you were after the lights came up and Aldwick had stormed out of the play. I heard James Lichfield, the new Duke of Southwark, say that it was nice to finally make your acquaintance, and he actually bowed. It seems like most of the patrons had not met you before, even some of the old crowd like Earl Pierre Bear, even though I have met them all many times. You really enjoy being the power behind the throne, don't you? Well, behind the throne in this world, I suppose. Mum? After we'd taken our bows and all crammed behind the backstage screen, I was so happy to see you I wanted to kiss you. But after hearing your explanation, I could have bloody murdered you. I've never seen Warwick so full of emotion, first hugging you, then anyone else he could wrap his arms around. The whole lot of them were laughing like it had been a game. But I did not think it was at all funny. After Warwick tore himself away from Mina, he asked you how you'd managed it. And there again was your silvery laughter. You replied to him quietly, "But I heard you." "I am old and cunning," you said, shrugging. "I was old and cunning even before the young lord's mother came to this place." "To London?" Sarah asked. "Sure, Bach," you said. I did chuckle at that, to be fair. I must have a talk with her about what's been going on around here. It's more than just magic painting and a whole lot of flooding. So that's it. You played along with Aldwick's plan, putting me through all this stress simply because you, in your words to Annalene, really love the theatre. I suppose it all has ended okay. Well played, Morwenna. Well played. Right, I've got 1,000 things to be doing. The bellroom is in such a state, and I need to set it back to rights before next week's installation by a collection of contemporary Spanish artists on the theme of Sant Jordi. On that note, I should call Edgeworth and Sons and ask them if they would like to arrange a long-standing retainer, as I'm tired of cleaning up seawater and pond water and pulverised diamond dust and grave earth and bramble thorns and cursed tarot cards, iron nails, dried herbs, animal fur, partially burnt paper, and a darn sight more blood than seems normal for an art gallery. Once that's all sorted, I have a contract for Carissa Verville to sign. She came into the office the day after the play and proposed subletting one of our rooms as the new office for the rebuilt Definite Articles. I see no reason why not. We don't need the money, but the world will be better with her newspaper in it. I presume you agree, Morwenna? And I'm making arrangements for Sarah and I to go to Brighton for a well-deserved holiday. It's not Morocco, but I think it's the best I can do at short notice. Sorry about that, Morwenna. But I'll tell Warwick that he'll be covering for me. I'm sure he'll love that.
That's a wrap for Season 3, and now some updates. Before anything else, thank you so much for tuning in every fortnight, for your nice comments in the Discord, on Spotify, on iTunes, and elsewhere. Podcasts live and die on word of mouth. There are no algorithms here, they are the tools of the enemy. We don't need them, we won't use them, but a nice review on whatever service you're listening to this right now would be immeasurably helpful. To that end, we have made a short survey to help us get to know our audience a little better. If you can spare a few minutes to help us out with feedback, the link is in the show notes. Thank you so much there. Season 4 planning starts now, and I'll be writing it just as soon as the 2 Warwick specials are out. If you'd like to listen to those bonus specials, we have a Patreon where you can get fun perks and support Wolfie and I directly. At time of recording, we have 4 options for you. Patrons of the Arts receive early episodes up to 2 weeks before they are published in the main feed. Journeymen of the Arts receive that as well as the interseasonal bonus episodes. Masters of the Arts also receive anything from our merch store as a welcome gift, shipped from us to you anywhere in the world. And those able to support the show at art producer level receive all of this plus their name in the credits of the episode they helped us make. That's all I have for you, only leaving you with the advice to be careful in joining the theatre. Who knows where it might take you. The Phosphine Catalogue is a Namtao production. The voice of Jude Francis Sharp is Wolfie Thorns. The show is written and produced by me, Tris Oaten, and I also provided the voice of Lord Dean Aldwick. It's all made possible by the generous support of our patrons at patreon.com/Phosphine Catalogue, and especially our art producer, Stephen McCandless. For links to our merch store, the music and Mastodon account, check out the podcast's website, phosphinecatalogue.com. The catalogue will return.